Hero Chapter 15. Ben pounded on the door of the animal shelter. It swung open, and bright fluorescent light spilled out onto the street. A man in medical scrubs stood in the doorway, his hair sticking up in multiple directions. He rubbed a hand over his eyes. He looked like they'd just woken him up. Ben blinked and explained why they were there. "Come on in," the man said, waving a hand in the air. Ben and Noah followed him down a long hallway, toward the sound of an animal symphony. They stepped into a vast room lined with rows of cages. The shelter worker handed Ben a beat-up notebook and asked him to sign in. Then he pointed to the right side of the room. "Dogs are on that side," he said. "Hope you find the one you're looking for. I'll be at my desk if you need me." He headed off to the left. Ben and Noah headed down the first aisle. A beagle mix stared at them longingly with big, droopy eyes. A white terrier with one brown spot on her back jumped up on her hind legs and pawed at the cage. Her entire bottom half wagged along with her tail. A rangy mutt with a gray muzzle tilted her head as they passed and let out a howl. Ben couldn't believe there were so many dogs. Every one of them looked sweeter than the last. Had all of them had a home once? Did someone stop loving them, or did they have to give them up? It was awful. Ben and Noah saw dogs of every shape and size. There was the tiniest scrap of a dog, smaller than a chihuahua even, with a crazy underbite and fur spiking up from the top of its head. There was a creature that looked like a pair of eyes inside a huge ball of fur. And then there was the one that made Noah stop in his tracks and put his hand over his mouth. For a split second, Ben got excited. Had he found Hero or Scout? "Look at this dog," Noah said through his fingers. Ben looked. It was a boxy gray and white puppy with giant floppy ears twice as big as his head. He looked like a baby with a super soft coat and a pink muzzle. He had the biggest eyes Ben had ever seen, and they were looking straight at Noah. The little dog wagged his tiny tail and skittered around his cage. He turned in circles and hopped up and down a couple of times. "Who could abandon him?" Noah asked sadly. "Why doesn't anyone want all these dogs?" Ben knew how his friend felt. He wished he could rescue every single one of them, but right then, he was focused on finding his own two dogs. Were they in danger? Were they locked up and scared like these animals? He left Noah at the end of the row and turned the corner to the next aisle. He ran up and down the room, looking in every cage. His heart broke a little more at the sight of each dog, but he forced himself to move quickly. Finally, he got to the last cage. Hero and Scout weren't there. Desperate, Ben ran over to the shelter worker. The man looked up at him with a sympathetic expression. He probably saw people as panicked as Ben every day. "Not here, kid?" Ben shook his head and fought back tears. "Sorry. If you want to leave me a description of your dog and your phone number, I can call you if he shows up." "Two dogs," Ben said, "and I have a picture of them. Maybe you can tell me if you've seen them." He pulled out his phone and swiped to a shot he'd taken of Scout sitting near Hero. Both dogs looked right into the camera. The man studied the photo for a second. "I've seen the little guy, actually," he said. "Really? When?" "A few weeks ago." That was before Ben and Hero found Scout in the woods. "The dog wasn't here," the shelter worker went on, "but a guy came in looking for him. He left a picture." He dug through the piles of paper on his desk and pulled out a photo. He handed it to Ben. The dog in the picture was Scout. He was looking sadly through the bars of a dog crate. Ben was confused. His dad said no one had been looking for the puppy. Did he say it was his dog? "Actually, I was off that day, but one of the older guys that works here told me about it because it was kind of weird." "Weird how?" "Well, most people, if they're looking for their dog, they're real upset and want you to call them right away if any animal even looking like theirs comes in. But not this guy. I guess he didn't want to leave his number." "Do you know what he looked like?" "Sorry," the worker shook his head. "Like I said, I wasn't here." The guy's eyes lit up. "But his name would be on the sign-in sheet." He flipped back a few pages in the notebook and pointed to the right-hand column. It was right around then. Ben scanned the page. None of the names jumped out at him until he got to the bottom of the column. There, in loopy, uneven handwriting, was a name he knew all too well. Jack Murphy. "Thank you," Ben said, managing a weak smile. Anger flared up in his chest. His head was spinning. Why would Jack come looking for Scout? None of this made any sense. Something wasn't right. He could feel it, and he knew what he had to do next.